Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in to this session of Across the Curator's Desk. My name's Jeff Barker. I'm a curator here at the State Library of New South Wales, and today I'll be talking about a small collection of photographs in the PIX Magazine Negative Archive. They're tattoo photographs taken in Sydney in 1937 and 1938. But just before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which the library is built, the Gadigal people, and to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. The pictures we're going to look at today were all taken by Ray Olson, who was a commercial photographer working for PIX Magazine. In this image we can see Betty Broadbent, who was better known as the Tattooed Venus, and at the time this photo was taken was probably the most tattooed lady in the world. She came to Sydney as part of an American circus troupe run by the showman Arthur Greenhalgh. By the time Ray Olson took these pictures of Betty in 1938, she was probably the most famous tattooed woman in the world. She'd started getting her tattoos in 1927, and the tattoos on her body had been done by some of the world's most famous tattooists, including Tony Reniger, Joe Van Hart and Red Gibbons, and by 1938 she had over 565 tattoos on her body. One of the more famous tattoos took over 6 sittings, and it was a spread eagle that stretched from one shoulder to the other. On her lower limbs she had a tattoo of Charles Lindbergh on her right leg and a tattoo of Pancho Villa on her left. The other place that the PIX photographer visited was Fred Harris's tattoo studio in Sussex Street in Sydney. And for a number of years, Fred's studio was the only tattoo studio in Sydney. He had opened it sometime around 1916, and for over 28 years he dominated the trade in Sydney. And this image we can see Fred working on one of his clients. According to Fred, 1923 was the year women joined the craze to get tattoos, and butterfly and flower designs were the most popular, although not all of the designs were so discreet. One woman asked for 3 horses' head, a rosella parrot, a stag and a bunch of pansies all in one sitting. Another popular trend in the 20s was for women to have their legs tattooed so the designs could be seen through their stockings. In this image we can see a woman getting a dragon tattoo on her back. Tattoo designs often reflect the culture of the day, and Fred's small parlour was an important barometer for some of those trends during the interwar years. Sailors provided most of the canvases for Fred's tattoos, and these often had a long tradition that had been handed down from old sailing superstitions. A pig or pig's head, for example, was thought to guard against drowning. Eyes on the nipples would sharpen sight. A ship's propeller on the buttocks would improve movement, and hinges on the elbow would increase strength. This image is taken from the wall of Fred's studio, and it's clear that among the most popular tattoos in 1937 were women. In 1937, Fred Harris did around 2,000 tattoos, and in this image we can see one of Fred's regulars. His name was John Hennington, and he at the time claimed to be the most tattooed man in Australia. It seems from the records that he lived in Warranora, although we don't know much else about him. In this image we can see in stark detail the different components needed for Fred to conduct his work. Commercial tattooing changed with the introduction of the tattoo machine. Before this, sharpened sticks or pins were used to puncture the skin before rubbing the pigment into the holes. And in this image we can see the pigments and the gel lined up in the containers, but also we can see the tattoo machine in Fred's hands. Along the shelf behind is a number of other tattoo machines. These machines were first introduced in 1876 based on Thomas Alva Edison's electric pen. They were originally designed as a duplicating device, but in 1891 Samuel O'Reilly discovered that Edison's machine could be modified and used to introduce ink into the skin. The PIX photographer has captured a really significant moment in time in Sydney's cultural history, and it may be that these are the only photographs that have survived of Fred's studio. In 1944, after 35 years in the business, Fred died and his shop was closed. So that's it for this session of Across the Curator's Desk. Thank you very much for tuning in.